Bhagavatam, also Bhagavad Gita. Mm. Yes. No, it's okay. So many garlands. Are these homemade? They are? Your home? Okay. Okay. Okay, okay. So it's like yes and no. Yes, made home. There's homemade and homegrown. Yeah. So yeah, cartons. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Rangana Yashodanandana Brajajana Rangana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Nandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radhe Radha Madhava, Radha Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radhe Radha Jaya Radha Kunja Bihari, Radha Kunja Bihari, Radhe Radha Jaya Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Radhe Radha Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Gauda Premanandi, Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa, Paribhrataka Stotra Satta Sri Simad, His Divine Grace, Shilabhai Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, ISKCON DBT Founder Charya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Samavata Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Hari Nama Sankirtana Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Jaini Tagore Pimanande, all glorious to be assembled devotees, all glorious to be assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Takshurmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanditam Sya Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusuti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Shaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the Supremost Human Being, unto Mother Saraswati, the Goddess of Learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesha Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhaviti Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, it becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamhitam Uttama Sloka Charitam Shakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasyaya Namaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantharaj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Surabhyay Namaha. Om Surabhyay Namaha. Om Surabhyay Namaha. Mukam karoti vasalam pangum langayate girim yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our morning Bhagavatam class. Either there or here. Oh, they're here. Yeah. Didn't see it. It's okay. Yeah. We are continuing from Canto 7, Chapter 3, entitled Hiranyakashipu's Plan to Become Immortal. What text are we doing? 19, huh? So text number 19. Naitat purvarshayas chakrur na karishyanti chapare nirambhur dharayat tranan ko vai divya sama shatam naitat purvarshayas chakrur na kadishyanti chapare nirambur dharayat pranam kovai divya samasatam naitat purvarshayas chakrur na karishanti chapare nirambur dharayat pranan kovai divya samasatam naitat purvarshayas chakrur na karishyanti chapare nirambur dharayat pranan kovai divya samasatam naitat purvarshayas chakrur na karishyanti chapare nirambur dharayat pranan kovai divya samasatam naitat purvarshayas chakrur na kadishyanti chapare nirambur dharayat pranan kovai divya samasatam. Naitat purvarshayas chakrur na kadishyanti chapare nirambur dharayat pranan ko vai divya samasatam naitat purvarshayas chakrur na karishyanti chapare dirambur dharayat pranan ko vai divya samasatam na not etat this purva rishaya the sages before you such as Bhrigu Chakru executed na nor Karishyanti will execute cha also apare others virambu without drinking water harayat can sustain pranan the life air ka who vai indeed divya samaha celestial years shatam 100 translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Even saintly persons like Bhrigu, born previously, could not perform such severe austerities, nor will anyone in the future be able to do so. Who, within these three worlds, can sustain his life without even drinking water for 100 celestial years? Kind of repeat after me. Even saintly persons like Bhrigu, born previously, could not perform such severe austerities, nor will anyone in the future be able to do so. Who within these three worlds can sustain his life without even drinking water for 100 celestial years? Report. It appears that even if a yogi does not drink a drop of water, he can live for many, many years by the yogic process, though his outer body be eaten by ants and moths. The continuing description of Hiranyakashipu's austerities. We don't find such type of severe performance of austerity in modern day. Maybe somewhere in the Himalayas, possibly, but less known to everyone. But there are, just like in the Bhagavad Gita actually describes, we were discussing yesterday, it is right there in the Bhagavad Gita that yogis can actually reduce the intake of air and their body continues to live, to survive. There are yogic techniques not to be experimented with, where one can sustain his body without eating, simply through the energies that are there actually in the air, for example, or in nature. These are extremely rare and not to be imitated. In the Bhagavatam, it also mentions how there are, for example, Srila Vyasadeva, who is the compiler of Vedic literatures 5,000 years ago, is still living in the Himalayas. There is mention as well that some few very special individuals are waiting for the next Satya Yuga to come. We know how drinking water is important. Doctors will attest to that. And anyone who has tried to follow Nirjala Ekadasi for the first time will remember one's attempt. For many people, they cannot. It's like they just become very weak and fall unconscious, isn't it? Whereas for others, it's all a question of practice, actually. It's a question of practice. And this shows and indicates how Krishna has put so much of, his energy. Material energy is like so powerful. Material energy is so powerful because Krishna is powerful, isn't it? That is one of the three tattvas that are described. Krishna is described as the Param Tattva. He is also described as Shakti Tattva. And then the third is, he is displaying this Rasa Samudra. Rasa Samudra Tattva, which is, of course, especially relishable and experienced during the month of Kartik. We were discussing briefly how it is especially during the month of Kartik that we remember and come to hear about these wonderful pastimes that are especially and only actually performed in the small village of Vrindavan. And that is why the pastimes displayed by Lord Krishna are the most attractive, because they display, they give an opportunity for the living entities to actually to see the loving exchanges actually between the Lord and his different devotees. As Prabhupada would say, Kali Yuga is just not that age for performance of severe austerities. The small austerities that are given to us in terms of chanting 16 rounds, following the basic rules and regulations, and fasting from grains on Ekadasi is like considered quite difficult for many devotees. So we'll just continue to read here a little bit. Text number 20. My dear, this is Lord Brahma speaking to addressing Hiranyakashipu after having been requested by the demigods to come to their rescue because of the severe performance of tapasya by Hiranyakashipu. My dear son of Diti, with your great determination and austerity, you have done what is or what was impossible even for great saintly persons. And thus I have certainly been conquered by you. Purport. In regard to the word Jita, as Srila Madhva Muni, Madhva Muni gives the following quotation from the Shabda Nirnaya. And the quotation is as follows: Parabhutam Vashastam cha jitabhi uchate budai. The translation is, if one comes under someone else's control or is defeated by another, he is called Jita. End of quote. Hiranyakashipu's austerity was so great and wonderful that even Lord Brahma agreed to be conquered by him. Text 21. O best of the Asuras, for this reason I am now prepared to give you all benedictions according to your desire. I belong to the celestial world of demigods who do not die like human beings. Therefore, although you are subject to death, your audience with me will not go in vain. Purport. It appears that human beings and asuras are subject to death, whereas demigods are not. The demigods who reside with Lord Brahma in Satyaloka go to Vaikuntha Loka in their present bodily constructions at the time of the dissolution. Therefore, although Hiranyakashipu had undergone severe austerities, Lord Brahma predicted that he had to die. He could not become immortal or even gain equal status with the demigods. The great austerities and penances he had performed for so many years could not give him protection from death. This was foretold by Lord Brahma. A very interesting point here, of course. We hear that every living entity who comes in the material world, and that's in the Bhagavad Gita itself. Who can find this verse? Abrahma Bhavana Loka. Yeah. From the highest planet in the material world to the lowest, or from the highest position living entity, all are subject to repeated birth and death. So then the question may be, why is it that in the purport, Prabhupada is telling that, actually in the verse itself is telling, I belong to the celestial world, this is Lord Brahma speaking, I belong to the celestial world of demigods who do not die like human beings. So there are two things actually. One is that the those who are residing in Svargaloka, in heavenly planets, they at some point actually have to leave their celestial bodies. So they do die, but not like human beings. They die in a different way. However, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives further light or insight that those living entities in Satyaloka, Satyaloka is the name also referred to for Brahmaloka, when they become perfected living entities, they return to Vaikuntha in their present bodily constructions. Actually, there are accounts in the Bhagavatam as well of personalities who, Dhruva, isn't it? Dhruva Maharaj, and others as well. Yeah, Dhruva Maharaj was able to return to the spiritual world in his same body. I mean, Tukaram. We don't have to go so far back. Tukaram is only a few hundred years. It is the understanding and accepted history that he returned. Krishna took him back in the self-same body. There are other examples. The Pandavas. The Pandavas, when Yudhishthira Maharaj came to know that Krishna had wound up his pastimes in in this material world, he immediately left, headed for north. In one interesting commentary or purport, Srila Prabhupada, I believe he quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who explains that actually those who are pure devotees, they are in a position to return to the spiritual world in their self-same body, but most of the time they leave their body. They leave their body. And he goes on to explain that actually if it would happen too often, it will be bewildering. It would bewilder the common people. That so it does happen, but it is very rare, and that we can understand also. Those living entities who are completely purified, it means that their so-called physical body has taken full and complete shelter of the Lord's internal energy, isn't it, of Daivi Prakriti. So therefore, they are not subject, of course, as I mentioned, in the vast majority of cases, they perform what is referred in our Shastra, this pastime. Even Lord Krishna, of course, and that's often a question raised that, of course, in the Bhagavatam, Krishna's departure is not discussed very much, but it mentions that even though he was shot, an arrow pierced his, what is it, ankle something, that he actually rose to the in the sky like that. Of course, many of these things cannot be verified scientifically or by medically, but there are there are still just like I think even in our present times. I remember reading some kind of yogi, I guess, was able to live for many years and without without eating. So these are, of course, very very rare, and it gives us a little insight as to how there are two things: how powerful is material nature, how some individuals can do things completely impossible for the vast majority of people. So it means that within this material energy, especially as we deal with the more subtle energy, our body, material body is existing on two levels, the gross level that we are witnessing and seeing every day, but more powerful and more, I would say, less known is the subtle body of the mind, intelligence, and ego. And it is in that subtle body or interaction with that subtle body that that yogis can, we say, enter different dimensions. We are the common people, common folks are able to interact on what we call three-dimensional world. But there are other dimensions there, which by certain exercise or practice, one can come to know about these other dimensions. And of course, that's only on the material bodily platform. What to speak of the immense power, actually, of the Atma, of the spirit soul. It is described that, I mean, all of us, we are sitting here, and when we look in the eyes of an individual, doctors, they can attest to that, of course, the life force comes through the eyes. I mean, it comes through all the parts of the body, but one can see it through the eyes. And of course, when the life force is no longer there, then it doesn't, the eyes change, like that. But it is described that this small Atma, we are that small Atma within the body, is extremely powerful, more powerful than the sun, if not hundreds of suns. I forget the exact description. So this all points to the immense, this Shakti Tattva that is described in the Shastra. The Lord, He is the source of this internal energy, external energy, and of course of the jiva as well. So, this is interesting. Prabhupada explaining how those in Satyaloka, at the end of the life of Lord Brahma, because it's only perfected living entities who can reside there. They go back to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. In the purport also, Prabhupada is indicating that by explaining this to Hiranyakashipu, Lord Brahma is indicating that that he will not be able to be eternal. We'll read one more text here. Text 22. Okay, now this is Narada Muni, who's who is giving this narration. Sri Narada Muni continued, after speaking these words to Hiranyakashipu, Lord Brahma, the original being of this universe, who is extremely powerful, sprinkled, transcendental, infallible, spiritual water from his kamandalu upon Hiranyakashipu's body, which had been eaten away by ants and moths. You didn't ask that yogi what kind of water he had in his kamandalu.
I don't think they will be having the food also. For us also it was like very difficult to get one roti there.
To get one roti. But you seem to have survived quite well. So Lord Brahma, he is sprinkling this very completely spiritual water on the body of Hiranyakashipu, which had been eaten away by ants and moths. Thus he enlivened Hiranyakashipu. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains here, Lord Brahma is the first created being within this universe and is empowered by the Supreme Lord to create. Tene Brahmadidaya Adikavaye. Adikavaye. The Adi Deva or Adi Kavi, the first living creature, was personally taught by the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the heart. There was no one to teach him, but since the Lord is situated within Brahma's heart, Brahma was educated by the Lord himself. Lord Brahma, being especially empowered, is infallible in doing whatever he wants. This is the meaning of the word Amoga Radhasa. He desired to restore Hiranyakashipu's original body, and therefore by sprinkling transcendental water from his water pot, he immediately did so. And then the next verse, as soon as he was sprinkled with the water from Lord Brahma's water pot, Hiranyakashipu arose, endowed with a full body, with limbs so strong that they could bear the striking of a thunderbolt, with physical strength and a bodily luster resembling molten gold. He emerged from the anthill a completely young man, just as fire springs from fuel wood. Short purport by Srila Prabhupada. Hiranyakashipu was revitalized, so much so that his body was quite competent to tolerate the striking of thunderbolts. We have a hard time with mosquitoes. He was now a young man with a strong body and a very beautiful bodily luster, resembling molten gold. This is the rejuvenation that took place because of his severe austerity and penance. Yeah. Not to be imitated. So, any comments on this? Yes.
Maharaj, in Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Brahmaloka is also part of the material world. So with pious activities, you can go to Brahmaloka. But it says, Kshine Punye Marjaloke, you have to come back to this mortal world.
Yes.
But in the Bhagavatam purport, just now we read that the demigods go from there to
Vaikuntha. Yes, yes. How to understand this contradiction? How to resolve this contradiction? Well, let's. I forgot to read actually the verse that is in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Attaining the Supreme. So we'll quote, very well known verse. Abrama bhuvanal loka punar avartino arjuna mamupetya tukunteya punar janma navidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So,
921 it says Kshine Punye Marjaloke.
920?
21.
921. Yes. Okay, well, I'll just read the translation here. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. Just like here on this planet, and for that matter on any planet, but especially on this planet, this planet, the planet Earth, situated within the middle planetary system, is that place where one can decide to go up or down. And up or down means up or down within the material world, or just all the way up, beyond the material world. So in the same way that we were mentioning a few minutes ago, there are living entities who, by becoming perfected, even from this planet, can go back to the spiritual world, isn't it? So that in itself would contradict this as well, in the sense that everyone in the material world who is still subjected to the modes of material nature, wherever one may go, even up to the highest planet, has to come down. But those living entities who become perfected, and specifically in the Bhagavatam, a verse that we are reading this morning, there is that highest planet, or Brahmaloka, where only perfected living entities reside. Then those perfected living entities return with Lord Brahma to the spiritual world. Yeah. So in that sense, there's not exactly an exception. It means the verse in the Bhagavad Gita is especially referring to those who are still connected with the modes of material nature, who perform their different activities for some material gain. Yeah, which is the case, of course, of Lord, not Lord, of Hiranyakashipu. So Hiranyakashipu was, is labeled and is known as Asura because of his activities, especially against Dharma, etc. And although he performed all of these austerities, he could not, his desire was to become immortal. But the whole Leela, of course, is demonstrating that that he could not attain that. So it means that those who are still materially motivated, those therefore who are still connected with the modes of material nature, they are constantly going up and down within the material world, where they simply continue to experience this cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, right? However, those who take to Krishna consciousness, those who become purified and perfected, and they can be anywhere actually within the material world. More easily it is accomplished on this planet, but in the heavenly planets, the planet which more easily allows for living entities to become perfected is in Brahmaloka. Because Prabhupada also explains, our acharyas explain, that generally in the heavenly planets, one lives out his good deeds. And there's so much of opportunities for sense enjoyment there that one cannot, one generally has to, again, return to this planet. So like that, both exist, and that the main difference being those who are still on the bodily platform, either gross or subtle, as opposed to those who are completely, we could say, liberated and freed from all bodily designation, all material attachment. Yeah.
Indra is in the Brahmaloka. Still, is he under the material modes that he has behaved in certain
Yes,
ways?
yes, yes. The material modes of nature are all pervading, and and therefore we see activities of certain demigods which are tinged with these modes of material nature.
So not all demigods go to Goloka from there. Some of them have to come down and.
Majority of them come down. Only those who are in Satyaloka, and we all know how it is very rare for an individual to attain that high status or high level, although it is possible, and that is what all of us are endeavoring to do. Yeah, and that is what the process of bhakti or devotional service gives one an opportunity to actually. It is described how when the living entity enters or comes to this material world, we get caught up in this web. It's like that is the real World Wide Web. And once caught up in that World Wide Web, it's practically impossible. It is possible, but very, very difficult. Again, as confirmed and explained by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, after many, many lifetimes, and Bahunam Janmanamante, and therefore the importance of the association of devotees and all of the activities that are taken up by those who finally, again, reconnect or come in contact with this knowledge. Yeah. Yes. Anything else?
Maharaj, even now in Gujarat, actually, there is somebody who is a Shakta.
Okay.
Devi, actually.
Ah.
So
Okay.
still there. And the NASA, the American
NASA, yeah.
took him and tried to do some experiments on him.
Okay.
So they put him in a room and closed him without giving him any food. And he survived. But then they couldn't know but the process of coming to that level. So he's a very severe
Right.
worshipper of the earth. So they still existing. He's a normal person. He does normal activities.
He gives interviews?
I think it was there on the news actually. It was there. So
Okay.
I think it's
Yeah.
not published widely because
Okay.
media doesn't like to cover these things.
Right.
What's happening there.
Good. Yeah, I recall reading or hearing something like that. Yeah. It's very rare, but it's there. Yeah. I was mentioning about like Nepal, the young Buddha. Yeah. Similar kind of. Prabhupada mentions in the context of sati, we won't get into this controversial topic too much, but Prabhupada mentions how in Buddhism there is that practice, what's the actual word? Self, huh? Yeah, self-immolation. Where, because we all know that within the body there's heat, fire. It's not like exactly the fire that we, but there's heat, that means fire. And and either one can induce this type of self-immolation directly, or sometimes it happens, but very rare. Don't worry about it. You won't just like catch on fire. But I mentioned this in the context of sati because in one explanation, Srila Prabhupada was mentioning that the Vedic culture is such that when properly followed within the system of varnasrama, or within the Vedic culture of dharma, the wife who would look upon her husband as her guru or spiritual master, and therefore was completely dependent upon him for her protection in all respects. If the husband prematurely left, that attachment was so strong. Yeah, Prabhupada was mentioning that that due to this intense separation, that kind of reaction would take place, and because a few years back, some reporter was going around interviewing different sadhus all over India on the controversial topic of sati, whether they supported or did not support. I think it was like half and half. Many sadhus said that this is actually in the Shastra, it is Vedic, it is authorized, Prabhupada also mentions, but it is not applicable now. Our Matajis can be. Huh?
Later on it became forced.
Yeah, right. That's
So
not,
they were forced. That was something which is not part of the scriptures.
correct. Yeah.
It's voluntary. It's a voluntary.
Yeah.
Even Gandhari also. Dhritarashtra could burn his body.
Ah,
And Gandhari took, she's in the same fire, she also burned.
yeah, but in the Mahabharata video, they don't show like that. Yeah. Of course, many of these things are just like, what is very basic in the Vedic culture, and the most significant aspect of brahmacharya life is celibacy. But you speak about celibacy in a Western country, and they cannot relate to that. absolutely not, yeah. So, so that's why many things that are referred to, whether it's sati or whether it's celibacy, unless one is trained or exposed to the culture, one is simply too one's consciousness just cannot comprehend, cannot accept these things. And in a similar way, unless we live the recommended lifestyle, which is described actually in the Shastra, then so many things will evade us. We will not be able to understand. We at times, in the context of Varnasrama, speak about this, mentioning how the Vedic culture being very, let's say, the lifestyle being very, very simplified, much more simplified than what we see today. It is only when one lives that kind of lifestyle that one can understand so many aspects. In particular, for example, what is meant to be the relationship between men and women, what is meant to be the role and the duties of men and women in general. It cannot be understood unless one experiences that kind of lifestyle. Anything else? Your hand is half up. Yours, no. Okay, maybe just scratching yourself. He's about to raise it.
My question is,
Okay. Your question is of another nature. Okay, let's end this Bhagavatam class. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Gaura Pimanandi.